Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Mike Phillips, and I am the host. Welcome out here to the Leadership Toolkit today. So this podcast, it's all about growing yourself, growing the people around you. As I mentioned, I really want to bring on some awesome people from different verticals of leadership and management. They can share their successes, their failures, what's worked for them, what hasn't worked for them, so that you too can grow. So thank you so much for joining me today. I've got an absolutely phenomenal guest with me today. His name's Ian MacLeod. He is with Gro Up Leadership. I had the absolute pleasure to connect with him when I was out in Austin a few weeks ago. So welcome to the show, Ian from Gro Up Leadership. Oh, and I forgot, I got to represent, man.
Oh man, the hat.
Represent. Yeah, let's go.
Yes.
Let's
Thanks,
go.
man. Hey, thanks for having me on, man. I'm
Yeah.
excited to hang out with you and chat with you. It's always good to chop it up about leadership. I am a nerd about it, so I enjoy talking to anybody who will listen. My wife is usually tired of listening to that, so it's good to have somebody else to chat with about
Different
it.
outlet, right?
Yes, exactly, man. Well, thanks for having me on, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for making the time, and to be able to share with my audience, your audience, and the rest of the world, right? This is a worldwide deal. So
Nice.
I know you, I've gotten to know you really well over the last few years, and I know you're absolutely amazing. You have a little bit different perspective sometimes on leadership and management and the way that you approach things. But for the people that may not know you yet, and you should check out his channel at youtube.com/grow up 12. There it is. So if you haven't had a chance to check out Ian, I would make sure that you go check him out. But do me a favor, Ian, and just share with the audience a little bit about your background, about who you are, and let's chop it up.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my name's Ian MacLeod. I provide leadership training services to both individuals and businesses with a focus on fundamentals of performance management. I'm leveraging my 15 years management experience at a large nonprofit organization. That actually culminated in various leadership roles up to senior manager roles with about five large teams of about 80 staff reporting to me. I also have 5 years experience training and onboarding new leaders, so new supervisors. That was about 5 or 10 a year, as well as ongoing development for large leadership teams. So we did a kind of a leadership development forum. Um, I was rather fortunate to work at an organization that valued leadership and development and provided routine training. So I was really used to that. When I started really trying to apply what I learned, it was just inspiring to see how you can alter the trajectory of a struggling employee, build somebody's confidence, develop future leaders, make a real difference by simply applying what I learned. So after a while, I actually, started to become a kind of, like I said, a nerd of leadership development. And I eventually started sharing some of my knowledge on YouTube during the pandemic, and things have kind of slowly progressed from there. So, like I said, now I have kind of a training services that I provide. You can check me out at www.gro-leaders-up.com. And that's where you can find all my services. Again, I'm on YouTube. Also hit me up on LinkedIn, TikTok, those kind of places too.
Absolutely. And then you shared your link tree. I'll leave that up on the screen for a little bit here.
Thanks,
so
man.
when you and I started talking, I was fortunate. I think you and I have known each other probably a little bit before the pandemic. We've had a good opportunity. We're in Ian and I are in sort of a leadership mastermind group together. And so we've had a really good opportunity to be able to learn from one another, to challenge one another. So one of the things that we started chatting about, and I'll bring this right in right away, with when we were talking about this show, one area of Ian's expertise, and you brought up, was performance management, setting expectations, evaluating people, delivering feedback, and coaching them. And I said right before the show, I said, here's one of the things that I feel. I think that we could get into setting expectations and delivering feedback in the coaching part, but I feel like performance management is a byproduct of those things. And you immediately stopped me and said, well, hold on. So how do you define some of these pieces? when you're talking to performance management, is that a byproduct, or is that something that you go in with a goal in mind? And then how are you setting it up? How do you define it, Ian?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think performance management, and that's, I mean, the reality with all of these terms like leadership, management, all these terms can mean different things. And it's such a broad, array of different things that it's applied to. I mean, you even talk about leadership, again, it could be leadership for, a coaching a baseball team, like a kid's baseball team, or it could be uh, CEO of leadership in terms of CEO and management, CEO of a huge organization that employs thousands of employees and is $1 billion industry. So I think that's the thing when you talk about any of these terms. There's a wide range of applications in a sense. When I think about performance management, and one of the things that I found in working with a lot of different places is that they focus heavily on the leadership and management, and they're thinking about that. They're maybe even taking courses or training. They're reading books. They're watching TED Talks. And they're learning about all these different things, but oftentimes what they're missing is some of those foundational, fundamental components. And so when I think of performance management, it really is just that. It's helping to manage performance, particularly performance of your team, of your employees, that kind of thing, especially if you are managing people. Now, of course, there's other management roles, but that is that where you're making sure to set clear expectations, as I kind of shared, having a way to evaluate staff, provide and deliver effective feedback, and ultimately creating accountability so you can reach whatever goals that you set. I mean, that's really the point of management oftentimes, is seeing where we want to go, and how do we get there, and how do we help these folks achieve those goals, whatever they may be. So kind of long-winded answer there, but I think of it as very simple, as just, again, being clear about what expectations are and helping people understand how they're moving towards those goals.
So one of the things you brought up is accountability and goal setting. One thing that I have found, and you may have seen this also, is that oftentimes when you are, or when managers are setting expectations with their staff, it often becomes the manager's duty or the manager's belief to set the expectation or set the goal, and they automatically expect the staff to adopt that. How do you go about setting sort of a collaborative, so and I'm assuming this about you, I'm not trying to load your lip, of a collaborative, like how do you go with setting expectations and goals with your staff versus, because there is a difference between you telling them and you engaging them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a great question, and it does really vary in terms of obviously, what the work somebody's doing, right? What are the goals? What is the purpose of their role? And how does that fit in? So, just in short, making sure that they understand what's the purpose of this organization or this company that you're doing. What are you trying to achieve? What's your mission? And then how does their role align to that, right? So what specifically actions are they doing to help achieve this larger mission or this larger purpose? So helping them understand that first and connecting those dots. I do believe certainly in most aspects and with most goals, you do want to try to make it as collaborative. But again, it depends on how large a group you are, what you're trying to achieve, the work you're doing. I think too, there's also some importance to leadership providing direction and clear guidance as far as what is expected of them. And some of the challenges I think that I oftentimes see is that people will what oftentimes will happen is a manager may onboard a new person, right? They bring
Sure.
somebody on, they train them in a sense, they tell them this is how you do your job, and then they just set them out to do that. And then they get frustrated later when this person isn't performing at whatever, right? And they're like, well, I trained you how to do this. And so the question oftentimes is, but did you set clear expectations in a way where they understand that this is what is expected of them? Or did you just throw everything at them during training? And oftentimes I find that's really the case, that you need to also set these kind of clear expectations for people of how do they achieve success? What does success even look like? And then even within that too, then you have a transparent process for how you're evaluating that success. And oftentimes too, that's, evaluating in terms of, okay, you're either successful or you're exceptional or you're developing in this area, and potentially you'd have multiple areas, usually from a quality standpoint, so looking at the quality of work, and then also looking at the productivity of work, so how the numbers, how fast somebody's doing, that kind of thing too. So usually it's the two buckets that I recommend or that I see work best
Sure.
for folks. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I think the collaboration part comes in where also, it just depends on how wide open their job is. And sometimes that is helping somebody set their path forward. When you're setting an expectation too, I will say that it's kind of, this is where we want to be, but you don't necessarily always have to tell somebody how to get there. Right. And so that's where
Sure.
maybe you're being very collaborative in that path to that. Um, I will say
Well, I think
too, you go ahead.
I was just going
I'll
to say,
stop
I
there.
think it's relevant too to determine, like, we as managers and leaders go in knowing what we believe success looks like. Not
Right.
necessarily for us, but we know what success looks like for the organization. And then we also, underlying that, every person, anybody that is a successful business person, because that could lead us to a whole nother conversation. Like, well, what's the view of success?
Right.
What's the measurement of success? Right. And like you're saying, there's a lot of times it varies. The measurement of success for a business could be a sales goal. The measurement of success for, like, the nonprofit that you're working with right now, what's the impact that they're making in their community? The measurement of success, like, we look at it as leaders and managers, and we should have a defined vision and a level of success that we're going after. But then we have to acknowledge, and one thing I think that, I don't know, it became really apparent during the pandemic, was the fact that uh, many managers and leaders did not acknowledge what success looked like to their people. They were only worried about what success looked like to the business, then, and
Right.
how it affected them.
Right.
And I think that there's been a revelation of, well, it is important to know not just what success looks like for the company, not just what success looks like for management, but also what does success look like for that individual. That helps you to define the accountability. That helps you to say, okay, well, for you to get X, the company has to achieve Y. And then and not YWHY, but I do think you touched on that, was
Yeah.
people got to
Purpose.
understand why they're doing stuff.
Absolutely.
It's more than just saying, oh, okay, well, here's this training and go execute on it. Like that is a little bit old school mentality. And not to, I mean, because there's a time and a place, right? Like and I'll use this just as an example, don't read into it too much if you're watching this. But like the military mentality, like, when I say jump, you say how high. And it's like, well, now the question in business is, when I say jump, let me tell you why you're jumping, right? Because otherwise this thing's coming at you and it's going to steamroll you. So if you don't, people are like, oh, okay, I get that. Otherwise they're getting smacked by something coming at them.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. I mean, and what you're talking about is people need to understand, to be engaged in something, and that's really what you're looking for, is employees to be engaged in whatever larger work, your mission that you're trying to accomplish. To be engaged, they need to understand what they're engaging in, and again, the purpose, so that why, but also having that feeling of a larger purpose too. And where you're headed is then getting more into even the motivation component. How do you, because really here's the thing, you can bark orders, like you were
sure.
saying, and you can try to lead with carrots and sticks, but that's really ineffective, and it only gets you so far, right? What you're trying to do, and what all leaders are doing, managers and leaders, uh, are trying to influence behaviors. And to influence behaviors, you really need to tap into why people behave, how do people behave, and understanding that psychology of social behavior, human behavior, is so important. And that's why, again, training and all that is so important. Daniel Pink, I don't know if you know
Yeah,
heard Daniel Pink.
absolutely.
It's super famous guy, right? Well, the one thing he talks about, he looked at a bunch of research, actually looking at like extrinsic motivation, so monetary kind of motivation, that kind of stuff, and so much of it showed that really that only again gets you so far, in terms of the output that you're going to get out of employees. The three things that he really focused on and he encourages that you want to make sure you have is autonomy. So you want to create for your staff, you want to create autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So ensuring that they have at some point some ability to make their own decisions and to feel autonomous, to be able to master whatever work they're doing and feel like they are a master in it. And then again, having that purpose, that connection to the mission, and that feeling of why, the larger why of why am I doing this? Why am I here? Is so important. So those are, I mean, key components when you're thinking about your leadership and how that butts up against the performance management side of it too, right? So the performance management is the manager side, where you're setting clear expectations, you have a clear process on how you're evaluating, and you're providing really effective feedback within that to help guide somebody. But on the other side, you want to make sure that you're also promoting that autonomy, mastery, and purpose as well.
That's really strong. Autonomy,
Autonomy.
mastery, and purpose. AMP.
Yes. Yes.
AMP.
Yeah.
That's
I
up.
mean,
Get
he's,
fired up.
I can't take it. Daniel Pink, I think there's a TED talk out there about even specifically about that. I'm sure he's probably got a book, and he probably charges an exorbitant amount of money to come talk at your organization about that.
Sure.
So,
No, but that's great. That's really powerful information for anybody that's managing and leading. Balint from Leader to Lead says, question for Ian, if
yeah.
it won't be covered later. Just so you guys, for anybody watching, just so you know, this is literally a completely unscripted. We talked for 30 seconds beforehand. And other than that, the whole idea is like we touch on one, two, three things like, hey, what's this person good at? And we just want it to be an open and ongoing conversation. So please, if people do have questions, just drop them in the sidebar. It's not going to affect our timeline whatsoever. There is no timeline. We were talking beforehand, like we could run a 4-hour gig and just keep going. We won't. Don't
Yes.
worry. It's like 45 minutes or an hour.
We'll try to keep it
But
concise. Yeah.
so here's the question. It says, what, in your opinion, is the biggest challenge for a people manager, also for a senior people manager? So somebody that's been one that's an executive and probably been doing it for a little bit. So what's the biggest challenge for a people manager?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great question. I will say, and that's kind of the question of the ages, I think, for leaders and managers. I think probably the biggest challenge oftentimes is understanding your role and how you fit in and how you help other people fit in to this larger equation, right? Unfortunately, a lot of organizations and a lot of folks who move into leadership, they're not afforded the training, and information and support. So they have to go outside and look for resources. Luckily, Leadership Toolkit, other things like that are available. This kind of information is here to help out. But I think one of the biggest challenges, that oftentimes leaders are not receiving the training and guidance that they need from the organizations. So they have to oftentimes go seek that out. And here's the thing, I will say, I think one of the biggest things that if you can get from anything as far as your role as a leader, is understanding the potential. And potential is so important. So understanding potential in your employees and understanding potential in yourself. And that's really where then you are going to be focused on your own development as well as the development of your staff, right? When you're setting a goal, for your team, we're talking about goals and performance management. The idea is not necessarily that everybody's perfect right out the gate. The idea is that they have the potential to reach those goals. And so I think that's really important to kind of understand that you as a leader, you should be trying to work on your own potential and developing yourself, as well as your team. And the sooner you can grab onto that, the easier things will be, and the more exciting all of this becomes, I think.
Well, and I think one of the things on my show a couple weeks ago, Matt was on with me, and we're talking about leaders, like as you're saying, Ian. And so this has been a recurring theme, a recurring piece of the discussion that's come up, right? Is okay, like potential will take you so far, but what are you actually actively doing about it?
Right.
So, yeah, you can have all the potential in the world, right? You can every person out here has the potential. I have the potential to be in great shape, right? But then
Right.
I have to go to the gym and eat less potato chips and cake. But so potential will only carry you so far. There has to be some action and some activities that go along with that.
Absolutely.
And I think he poses a really good question. And again, he's got a great channel too, leader to lead. But the question where it's like, what's the biggest challenge? Well, what day of the week is it, and which one do you want to tackle?
Yeah. Right.
Right, right? Because that is so subjective, also. And for me, I would say also, like, well, what's the biggest challenge we face as leaders? I think it's sort of a combination, and I've said this before. It's a combination of ego and thinking we've arrived, right? You said this just a minute ago. Is like we move into that leadership role, and once you get a manager title, once you get a team lead title, once you get a CEO title, so many times people think, oh man, thank goodness, whew, I made it.
Yeah.
Thank goodness I made it, right? And then they stop. And the reality is this, like, if you grew to a certain point, you got acknowledged, you got you got seen for that level. Part of the reason you moved into that role is because of, like you said, they have potential. But then you still have to continue having an attitude of learning and growth, because if you don't, you moved in, you may have been a level 9 employee, right? Kicking
Right.
butt, taking names, doing great things. And they said, man, this level 9 employee would make a really good manager. And so they moved you into management or system management, or whatever that is. And again, regardless, whether it's a sales organization or a coaching organization, a nonprofit like you're in, um, but when you move into that role, you're not still a level 9 employee. You're now like a level 5 or 6 or 7 leader. And the reality is you have other employees that are coming up, sevens, eights, nines, and those sevens, eights, nines are only going to follow a level 5 leader for so long if they see you're not developing yourself.
That's an excellent point. And well, and this is kind of goes with uh, his second question about, with particularly for a senior one, but really, I would say at any level. And I think you and I have even talked about it when you were in Austin. We were talking about this. That there's this concept called the Peter principle,
Yep.
right? And essentially, people are elevated to some level of incompetence, right? Because they're great at doing this job, like you were saying, they're great at doing this job. They're level 9, and then they're promoted up to a leader, and they don't know what the heck they're doing. So they're not promoted for their leadership skills. They're promoted because they were an outstanding, engineer or nurse or whatever they were. Right. And so now they're managing a group of people doing that. And it's a whole different job. I think at every level, one of the challenges to the work is that you need to operate at the next level. I see oftentimes, too often, where people are, and this is where you get micromanagement and all these different things, where people are good at this level, right? They're promoted up to this level, yet they work from this level down here. They
Mm,
manage too much in the trenches. So, and that can, even at a senior level, when you have somebody at that C-suite level, that senior kind of level, that's probably one of the biggest challenges I see, is that they are not operating at that very high level strategic planning level. Instead, they're down there in the trenches with people. They're in the wrong meetings. They're making the wrong decisions. They're forcing their teams to look to them to make all the decisions. And instead, they should be making the larger plan, really that strategy, and communicating that down and allowing these folks down here to, again, make those day-to-day decisions. And they need to get out the way. And that's probably a big problem I see with kind of your senior executive kind of level staff. And again, that really plays all into the Peter principle and kind of being good here, and now you're promoted up and you don't learn how to do this job up there. And that's where, again, you need to our point, I think we're both trying to make, is that you need to work on your development.
Sure. Well, so one of the things that's tough when you get to the level up here, right?
Yeah.
It's funny because I know you're showing this like as an analogy, but it's like, oh, hey, if you're performing at this level, but the reality is, as you rise up, right now, all of a sudden you're underwater, you can't breathe anymore,
Yes.
right? So,
Yeah.
so it's like if you get to that level, then I think something that's hard for a lot of people in general is accepting the fact that, okay, hey, I made it to that level, and now I don't know what I'm doing. And
Right.
where do I go? So let me ask you a question. I have an opinion on this, but I'm curious what yours is. Like when somebody goes into when they get that promotion, when they move into that next role, because sometimes even people are managing the previous team that they were on. Where do they turn for those resources? What are some of the things that they can do to start to elevate themselves, to start to move out of where they're at and move to where they're headed, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
I mean, it's a great question. And I think the first component, again, is having that humility to say that I don't know what I'm doing here, and I need to learn that. And that's, I mean, that's really, when you talk about, people talk about imposter syndrome and all that stuff, it's being humble enough to say, look, I don't know this. This is new to me, and I need to seek this out. Um, again, it's going to depend on what level you're at and that kind of thing. Obviously, I mean, there is actual education you can get at university kind of level, where you're looking at whether you're looking at getting masters or even PhD, in organizational leadership, MBA, that kind of stuff. But even a lot of those institutions now, they offer certifications, that kind of thing too, even aimed at executive kind of suite, and for a number of different topics as well. So that's a good place to start. Obviously, I mean, YouTube, podcasts, TED Talks, there's books, there's almost an exorbitant amount. I mean, there is an endless amount of information. I think sometimes it's just finding the right people to help you sort through that. But I,
I'm
I
gonna
feel like
hang
you
on
have
that.
some. I feel like you will have something more you want to add.
Well, I just was gonna say I want to hang on that statement because you just said it's finding the right people.
Yeah.
And I think it becomes hard. We're inundated. Everybody,
Yes.
we're inundated with so much information, social media, like you've said, YouTube, Google, you name it. There is so much information that you start to ask, well, what is the right information?
Right.
And how do I know it's good? I mean, for one, I think you do need to look to people that have actually done it or are doing it, right? And the my opinion, what better place to start than the person that is in your direct, purview? Like if you're a supervisor, you're a manager, the person that promoted you to that level, one of the best questions I think as a new leader or a new manager that you can ask is when you're going through that promotion to or a week or 10 days or 30 days after you're there, to be able to sit and have a real one-on-one conversation with them, because so often people, they'll promote you and then they say, oh, like you said, hey, go get it, go get some, right?
Yeah.
Let's do this.
Right.
And I think it's worthwhile to, yes, enthusiasm will carry you so far. And of course, everybody that get promoted, they're enthusiastic about it, right? When you're in a leadership role or you have somebody listening to you, you feel like somebody has some value to say or to add to you. Yeah, that's easy to be excited about. But it's once things start going a little bit sideways, you got to stop that person and say, hey, where do you see that I can develop? Where do you see that I could take myself to the next level? And in my experience, I've always been trained in the past, you got to fire up, right? Now, first, doesn't mean you never fired. And when I'm saying fire up, like you go to that management, that direct line of management and say, hey, where do you see that I can improve? What do I need work on? Now, it's worthwhile to certainly ask the people that are working for you that question as
Yeah.
well, because they'll have entirely different perspective. But if you're trying to learn to lead or learn to manage better, go to somebody that you already see or have as a good leader or manager. And one of the one of the faults with that statement I just made is so often we are looking at the direct leader or manager that we have and we're going, man, if I was in that position, I wouldn't do this or I would do this differently, right? And so sometimes we do have a crappy example. So then you go to their management or you go to other places. And like you said, you can branch out to all of these other areas. One place, and this, somebody could tell me like, oh, Mike, this is an old school mentality. Even before you go to YouTube or Google and so forth, because a lot of that can be put together quickly. And I do think it's valuable if you find somebody that's really got their act together on it, such as Grow Up Leadership or the Leadership Podcast, or Leader to Lead, or many of these other folks. There's really good resources out there. I am still old school that I like to either get an audiobook or get a written book. If somebody took the time to write it down, there's usually some value in that published piece of work, you know. I'm going to read from a couple of the comments too.
Yeah.
Balint says, hey, in my opinion, many people don't know what's their potential. He says, I struggle sometimes to identify what I'm best in.
Ooh, that's a whole nother, that's a
That's a whole
fun
nother
topic.
conversation.
It's strength-based leadership right there. That's about strength finder and all that stuff. Man, that's a good topic though.
And then Blue says, hey, I'm learning how, and this, gosh, this is so powerful. Blue was on my show before. And he says, man, I'm learning how to stop doing everything myself and trust my team to execute. You said that earlier. The key of that, having that autonomy, right?
Right.
You have to, there's something to be said about, okay, well, I'm going to tell them what they need to know. Then I'm going to show them how to do it. Then I'm going to do it alongside them. That's John Maxwell philosophy. Then I'm going to let them do it. And I'm going to report back, right? And then once they're doing it, and you get them to repeat it back to you on how well they did it or what did they learn and so forth. And that is really hard. One of the things that makes it hard to trust, and I'll just reveal some of my past here. I remember in my my early years of leadership and management, one of the things that made it hard to trust people to do what they were supposed to do, or to trust my team to execute on what they needed to do, was when I deep down knew that I had not educated them on how to execute.
I mean, you bring up an excellent point. Oftentimes, our own shortcomings as leaders, because we don't trust that we did our part as a leader, and we place on our team and our staff, and we reflect those things on them. And again, I think a lot of that is what we were talking about, is that people, I'm good at being an engineer, and I know how to do that really well. I'm now promoted to supporting a team of people doing that engineer. I'm no longer an engineer. I'm supporting people doing engineering. I need to help them be the best engineers that they can be, make sure that they understand what's expected of them, and provide feedback along the way, evaluate their performance, all that kind of stuff. And I need to support them to be that, but I don't need to be in that trench with them doing the engineering any longer. Unless again, there's a performance issue or something else. But really, oftentimes leaders, unfortunately, are getting in their own way of their team's work and their team's success.
So let me ask you a question then. Let's say you're using engineers in this example. We'll go down that path.
Sure.
I'm a really good engineer and I enjoy being an engineer, and then I get into promoted into leadership. Is leadership for everyone?
I think yes and no. There are a ton of words that are used for, what characteristics you need for being a great leader. You know, trustworthy, respect, compassion, empowerment, integrity. I think all those things are important. But the two main things that I think that we often don't see people talk about much, the two main things that you need to have to be a good leader, and this is it for me, because there are all kinds of different leaders that I think can be great leaders in their own right. The two main things that you need, one is that you need to like people. You have to enjoy people. If you don't like people, if you hate people, you do not need to be a leader. I mean, and just be realistic and be real. You need to like people. You need to be curious about people, because leadership is that. It is what we're talking about. It's influencing people, and it's not even, you don't control them, you're influencing their behaviors. So understanding what makes them tick, being curious about why they did this thing. And so that's one, you need to like people. That's important. The other part of it is just what we were talking about as well. And when I'm talking about potential, meaning like you see the potential in somebody's growth beyond what they can. So when somebody says to me, I don't know, you know, what I'm good at, or what my potential is, or what I'm strong at. I mean, that requires some coaching, but you see their ability to go from point A to point B, to achieve those goals, and you believe it in yourself. Those are, I would say, the two most important components. If you have those, anybody can be a great leader in some regard. Again, liking people and seeing the potential in people's growth and ability to develop.
I think that's really strong, man. I think that's a really strong point, because I do think, I agree with you. If you like people, and I think oftentimes people in general see managers or leaders like at the mountaintop, right? And the reality is, people lead from all over the place. They lead themselves. They may lead a team of 2 people. They may lead a team of, like you, 80 people. There's all these different various levels, but the reality is, to be a leader, and I posted this on my Facebook a couple weeks ago. It was something along the lines of, hey, to be a leader, like, your followers determine your level of success. It's not you. It's really about the people. And then I think, like, that statement that you said is so powerful. Like, you can see the potential and ability in people. And the reality is, people will always live up to the expectations you give them as a leader. Right. And what I mean by that, let me expand on it. People, if you are moving somebody, and my background, as you know, is sales and marketing. If I have somebody that's a salesperson for me, and the first month they do okay, and the second month they struggle, and the third month they struggle, and I start just saying, man, they're a crummy salesperson. They will meet your expectations and be a crummy salesperson.
Yes.
But if you do what Ian just said, and said, hey, I can see the potential, I can see the ability, right? And the reality is, you can't teach potential, but you can teach abilities. You can teach skills.
Right.
And so as a leader, if you take the time to say, well, wait a minute, you have the ability to be at the mountaintop in your own right. You could be a phenomenal salesperson. You could be a phenomenal engineer. You got to do these things. Well, then they have to have that drive and that want to participate with you. But I think it's right too. If you look at somebody sometimes and you tell them how good they actually are, they'll show you how good they are, right? It's the self-fulfilling prophecy. If you tell them how they're not good, then they won't be. So it's one of those things that it's just, it's tough, right? It's tough. So I think you bring a really good point. You have to like people, and you have to see the potential and ability in people. And I think I might have lost Ian. Did I lose you, Ian? Oh, he just texted me. Let's see where we're at. I could talk with the photo of Ian. Uh-oh. He says his power just cut out, so he let me see if he can get back on. All right, so I'm going to expand on that for just a second. We'll either Ian, he may be able to rejoin us here, or if not, then we're coming close to the end. We're here at 12:45. He's restarting his system right now. But one of the pieces that I'm talking about here is, when you're talking about people fulfilling what it is, what your expectations are, right there. If you're in leadership or management, I think it is important, and I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here and pontificate a little bit. It is important as a leader and manager to have some unbridled enthusiasm. You have to be, as Ian's saying here, hey, you got to like people and you got to see the potential and ability. Is uh, you got to have some unbridled enthusiasm for those folks, and so that when you're coaching them, you have to be as excited or more excited for them sometimes than they are for themselves, because people will fulfill that. The other piece that we're talking about here in leadership is, it's more than just liking people, it's more than just seeing potential and ability. There's an accountability piece as well, right? You can't just say, hey, this person has great potential, so I'm going to let them skate, right? You can't just say, hey, I really like them. And we do that often as leaders, we do that often as managers. We find somebody that we like, or that will do the small things for us, right? Like they're the best lunch getter in the world, and so because we like them, we start to cut them slack. There's still something that's important to be considered. You have to still hold them accountable. You're not doing yourself a favor, you're not doing anybody else a favor if you don't hold people accountable. Ian's just popping back in here, so here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Mr. Ian MacLeod.
Bro, I'm sorry.
No, it's good.
It
Hey,
is.
it's funny because we were talking beforehand, and it's like, hey, what if things don't go perfect? Well, it's a live stream; they're not going to. So
I appreciate the flexibility. It's so I'm in Austin, Texas. Well, and the South in general is having a I mean, we have heat already, but today it's like the uh the highs are like 105, 106, but it feels like 115 outside. So, and it's just been nonstop every day, like 104, 105. So
anything that starts with a one, I'm out,
man,
unless it's
it
in the
is
teens.
rough. Yeah. So it's been rough. So the power just kind of decided I need a break for a second or
It's
something.
good.
So, but it came right back on.
So one of the things I was expanding on a little bit while you stepped away,
Thank you.
right, was just when we were talking about liking people, and then potential and ability, but also accountability. And you brought that up, and I was saying, hey, people will exceed, they'll achieve the expectations you set for them. But and we've talked quite a bit about accountability. I said one of the things that managers fall into this trap, at least we do in sales, is you get the person that's the best lunch getter, and so you like them the best, right? And so you fixate on that number one that you said, oh, I really like them, they're awesome. And then you start to make excuses for number two. Well, they have potential, but, and then on down the line, right, number three, four, five, whatever it may be, you start to get lax on that accountability piece because you like people. And so how do you, like from your experience, uh, what are a couple or three ways, what are the best things that you can do when you are coaching somebody to help hold them accountable to, the the tasks at hand, the goals or the agreements that you've made with them, as you being their manager and them being your staff member?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question, and I think it does vary quite a bit in terms of what is the work they're doing, and where are they lacking in their performance, or where are they not successful currently. Um, so I think first, making sure you understand what that is, where that's been communicated well, that they understand that they're not performing. And sometimes I find that that's even the thing, that people just don't even know that this manager has these feelings or thoughts about them, and they're just saying, well, that's, yeah, they're my number 8 in my team. They're certainly not in my top 3. But that person has no idea, right? Because the only communication we get, yeah, you're doing a great job, that kind of thing, or good job, or whatever, or we don't even talk to them at all. So making sure they know making sure, again, our expectations are clear. And I think then from there, you need to, once they understand, you need to ask, right? What is your roadblocks? What are your challenges? What are the things that are holding you back from getting there? And really try to uncover that. I find sometimes what happens is people just don't know how to get there, right? So if you're talking about something like in sales, maybe they don't understand the sales techniques that are required to be successful in that. And so maybe that is just some mentoring, some shadowing with one of your top performers. Maybe that's them learning, about some simple techniques, practicing, role playing, that kind of thing. Oftentimes, what happens is, and there's a great book called Influencer. It's an older book called Influencer that really talks about identifying vital behaviors that lead to success and making sure people know what those vital behaviors are. So making sure people understand and know what those things are. And then what you need to figure out is why. Again, why? So you're asking why, but is it a skill issue or is it a motivation issue? And those are two very different things that you're going to address in different ways. And have they been able to perform successfully in the past, and are they not doing it now? So again, a multitude of things that you need to look at as a leader, and that is a collaborative conversation that you're having, and you're being honest with them. Look, this is where we need you. This is where you're performing. What's going on here, and you're working with them on that. I mean, ultimately, there are times where somebody still doesn't perform, and even after you've applied all the effort and work, then you're talking about potential corrective action, and going down that path. I mean, I've supported.
Nobody wants to talk about that,
Nobody
right?
wants to talk about that, but that's the reality. I mean, there's some times where it's not a good job fit. It's not working out for whatever reason, whether they lack the skill or they lack the motivation at that time. And at some point, you need to make a decision in the best interest of the business, their coworkers, the customers, and you need to possibly terminate. I mean, I've had to terminate not that many times, but enough times where it's not pleasant, but it was necessary.
Well, and here's one of the things, and you bring this up, we're kind of coming down the pipe to the tail end here, but the thing is, when I have had people, and anybody who's been in leadership for any length of time, and this is a twisted, but I've had people, like you said, you look at it as a skill issue, is it a motivation issue, is it a fit? What are these
Mhm.
things? You can teach skills. Motivation you can support, but can you teach it? No. Motivation comes from, and again, my opinion, motivation is sort of a need and want, like, and the only way you can drive motivation as a manager and leader is, like, you got to know what's important to them. Yeah, you got to know what's important to the business, but you got to know what's important to them to be able to help get them excited about what it is that they're doing.
Yeah,
you know I used to joke all the time, like, hugs and high fives are free, right? But you'd be surprised at how much that oftentimes people will perform and do for a high five, and an attaboy or an attagirl, a $5 Starbucks, those sorts of things. Like, the acknowledgement that's a huge motivator sometimes, man, and we don't put
absolutely.
enough weight in that. And then, when you're talking about terminating people, one of the things that's tough, and it's always just messed with my head, because, like, you're making, you're affecting that individual's life or livelihood potentially. But there are times that I have had to terminate somebody. I've had to let them go, and we have a conversation. Like, it may be somebody that I liked, because, like you said, you like people, and you end up letting them go, and I've had them thank me. And you have this conversation, and they go, no, thank you, I appreciate it, and move on. And some of those folks I am still friends with now. And the reality is, if you're holding somebody in a position, if you're allowing someone, I shouldn't say holding, but if you're allowing someone to stay in a position where they're producing subpar performance, not only does it affect the business, not only does it affect your leadership, because you have other people looking at them going, like, we know they're not performing. Right? The teammates are looking, going, hey, we see this is happening. uh, you are affecting that person's life and livelihood potentially for, um, that they're not living up to their potential. it messes with their head, because then they may start to think, is this all there is? Is this all I am? And so forth. And Blue says in the side, he says, I feel like it's been made a bad thing to be competitive. There's too many participation trophies. That, my friend, is a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about motivation for hours on its own. Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between participation trophies and just appreciating somebody for the work that they're doing, right? And making sure, because what everybody wants is to feel valued, right? Everybody wants to feel valued in something, in what they do, in what they contribute, in how they contribute. So I think there's a difference between, it's not about necessarily that you're the best or you're the greatest, or that we're saying everybody's on the same kind of playing field, or what have you. It's that everybody feels valued and everybody's a team player. And this is again why, what Daniel Pink was talking about. It gets down to creating autonomy, allowing for that person to have mastery, where they can become an expert in their own level with their own thing. We used to, even on teams, we would oftentimes try to, and this is again gets into a whole nother thing of strength-based leadership. So really, if anybody's seen Strength Finders, Gallup poll, that kind of stuff, that's great books, great ideas, but it is about identifying what unique strengths and talents somebody brings, and everybody has their own thing, and leveraging those things. You're going to get way more out of people if you can leverage their strengths versus spending all your time trying to hammer out their gaps and their opportunities and those kind of things. So focusing on that, I know we're kind of jumping around here, but when you get down to it, I mean, it is, again, finding value in that job fit that they have. And ultimately, I mean, you have to have real conversations if you are talking about someone who is, again, a low performer, not performing consistently, and you're considering termination, or again, you're having that conversation about job fit. But your job as a leader is to ensure that you've done everything to support them to be successful. It's not your job to do their job. And so if they can't do it, you're going to have to make that decision for them. And to your point, oftentimes people were thankful because they were just as frustrated and just felt just as defeated that they were in this job that they weren't able to be as successful in. And that forced them to go find what they are good at.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I think you bring a good point there too, with hey, just remove the roadblocks. Make sure that you do everything you can to help them be successful.
Yeah.
Not to do it for them, but
Right.
to help them be successful. What pieces am I serving up to you, so that you can, like, you're there to hand the tool off. They got to take the tool and utilize it, and so forth. So hey, as we're coming, it's right at 1:00 Mountain Time. It flies by, man. First,
awesome.
Any final thoughts, any final words, something to hang people on before the next show here?
Man, I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate the conversation in the comments and the questions. And man, it was great to just, again, chop it up and talk about leadership with you. If anybody ever has any questions, certainly hit me up through my LinkedIn, my YouTube, TikTok. I'm on several different platforms, so please hit me up through the link tree. And I'd love to just chat more with you. I always want to talk about this. I'm happy to help. So thanks again, man, just for the opportunity to talk.
No, really, thank you, man. I appreciate you bringing, like I said, I knew you'd be bringing great info. You'd be bringing the fire.
Thanks,
always doing it with a smile, and just great information about leadership and management and accountability, and like at the tail end here, communication. Like communicate, like we all think we're good communicators, but the reality is the quality of our communication is how are you receiving it and able to repeat it back to me. It's not what I think I said, it's what you heard me say.
Yeah.
So I think that's very powerful. So Ian, thank you so much for joining me today, man. I really appreciate you. And for everybody that tuned in to watch today, please do me a favor. Make sure you throw a thumbs up on the video here, or a like if you're on Facebook and so forth. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel. right? I'm on youtube.com/ at Mike Phillips, and subscribe to the channel. I'm doing this every Wednesday right here, right about noon. And we just have a great conversation with people from all different areas, all different verticals of business. Yeah. Balint says we need some rap rhymes from Ian. That's going to be the next show, man. That's going to
I'm
be
down.
the next show.
I'm down to do it. I'll do it.
All right. Well, once again, thank you everybody for joining me today on the Leadership Toolkit. Check it out on your favorite podcast platform. Tune in here on YouTube, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Until then, be great. We'll talk to you soon, everybody.